When Daniel was 9 years old, he believed promises were the strongest things in the world. Stronger than storms, stronger than time, stronger even than the distance between two hearts. That summer, the sun felt warmer than usual, the air smelled of fresh grass, and the small town where he lived felt like the center of the universe. Next door lived a girl named Lily. Lily had messy brown hair that always escaped her ponytail and bright green eyes that sparkled with curiosity. She was fearless in a way Daniel admired. She climbed the tallest trees, ran faster than most of the boys in school, and laughed loudly without caring who heard her. Daniel and Lily spent every day together that summer. They built forts from old wooden boards behind Daniel's house, raced their bicycles down dusty roads, and explored the creek that ran behind the neighborhood like it was an undiscovered river. One evening, after a long day of adventures, they sat under the giant oak tree at the edge of the field. The sky glowed orange and purple as the sun slowly disappeared beyond the hills. Daniel had found an old silver coin in the dirt earlier that day. It wasn't worth much, but to him it felt special. He held it out to Lily. "This is our promise coin," he said. Lily tilted her head. "Promise for what?" Daniel thought for a moment, then said the first thing that came to his mind. "When we grow up, we'll marry each other." Lily stared at him for a second, then burst into laughter. "You're serious?" "Of course I am," Daniel said, trying to sound brave even though his cheeks were turning red. Lily picked up a small stick and scratched their initials into the trunk of the oak tree. D+L. Then she took the coin and closed it in her fist. "Okay," she said with a grin, "it's a promise." For two kids who barely understood the world, it felt like the most important agreement ever made. But life rarely keeps childhood simple. Just a few months later, Lily's father got a job offer in another city. It happened quickly. One day they were playing in the yard, and the next Lily was packing boxes. Daniel didn't know what to say when he saw the moving truck. Lily walked over holding the coin in her hand. "I have to go," she said softly. Daniel tried not to cry, but his throat felt tight. "You're coming back, right?" "I don't know," she admitted. For a moment neither of them spoke. The wind rustled the leaves above them. Then Lily pressed the coin into his hand. "Keep it safe," she said. "When we see each other again, we'll remember our promise." Daniel nodded, even though he didn't understand how two kids could stay connected when they were about to live hundreds of miles apart. The car pulled away later that afternoon, and Daniel stood in the driveway until it disappeared around the corner. The oak tree still stood in the field. But the world suddenly felt much bigger. Years passed. Daniel grew up, finished school, and left the small town for college. Life became busy and complicated. Responsibilities replaced bike rides and tree climbing. Yet the coin stayed with him. It sat inside a small wooden box on his nightstand. Sometimes he would open it and stare at the scratched surface, remembering a girl with messy hair and fearless laughter. He wondered where Lily was. He wondered if she remembered. But as the years rolled by, the promise began to feel like a distant childhood dream. Something sweet but impossible. 2 decades slipped by, and fate was quietly preparing a surprise neither of them expected. 20 years later, Daniel returned to his hometown for the first time in nearly a decade. The town looked smaller than he remembered. The streets were quieter, the houses older, and the field behind his childhood home seemed less like a wild kingdom and more like an empty patch of grass. His parents had decided to sell the house, and Daniel had come back to help pack the remaining belongings. Inside the old bedroom, where he once kept comic books and toy cars, dust floated through the sunlight streaming from the window. Daniel opened drawers, sorting through forgotten memories. Old photographs, school notebooks, a cracked baseball glove. Then he found the wooden box. He opened it slowly. The silver coin still lay inside. For a moment, Daniel just stared at it. A strange wave of nostalgia washed over him. He could almost hear Lily's laughter echoing through the yard. He smiled softly. "I wonder where you ended up," he murmured to himself. Later that afternoon, Daniel decided to walk through town. He passed the same diner where his parents used to take him for pancakes, the library where he studied after school, and the park where he once spent countless afternoons. Everything felt familiar, yet distant. As he approached the small farmers' market set up in the town square, he noticed a crowd gathered around a booth selling handmade crafts and paintings. One painting caught his attention. It showed a large oak tree standing in a golden field at sunset. Daniel froze. It looked exactly like the oak tree behind his childhood house. He stepped closer to the booth. Behind the table stood a woman arranging small framed prints. Her hair was tied loosely back, and strands of brown hair fell around her face. Something about her seemed oddly familiar. She looked up. Their eyes met. For a brief moment, the noise of the market faded away. Daniel's heart skipped. "Lily," he said quietly. The woman blinked in surprise. "Daniel." Neither of them moved at first, as if their minds were struggling to catch up with reality. Then Lily laughed in disbelief. "I can't believe this." Daniel shook his head, smiling. "Neither can I." They stared at each other, taking in the changes that 20 years had brought. Lily was no longer the messy-haired girl climbing trees. She looked confident, calm, and thoughtful, but the same spark still lived in her eyes. "You live here?" Daniel asked. "I moved back 2 years ago," she said. "My parents retired here again. I started painting full-time." Daniel glanced at the painting of the oak tree. "You remember that place?" Lily smiled softly. "How could I forget?" For a moment, neither of them mentioned the promise. It hung silently in the air between them. They spent the next hour talking like two old friends who had simply paused a conversation years ago. They shared stories about their lives, their careers, the cities they had lived in. Yet beneath the casual conversation was a quiet curiosity, a sense that something unfinished still existed between them. As the sun began to set, Daniel reached into his pocket. "I kept something," he said. He placed the silver coin on the table. Lily stared at it, her eyes widening. "You still have it. You told me to keep it safe." She picked it up gently, running her fingers across the worn surface. "I thought you would lose it years ago." Daniel smiled. "I almost did, but every time I thought about throwing it away, something stopped me." Lily looked up at him. "You remember the promise." Daniel chuckled. "How could I forget? 2 kids under a tree making the most serious decision of their lives." Lily laughed, but there was warmth in her voice. "Kids say crazy things." "Yeah," Daniel agreed. But neither of them sounded entirely convinced. The sky darkened slowly as the market began to close. Before leaving, Lily hesitated. "Do you want to see the tree?" she asked. Daniel's heart beat a little faster. "I'd like that." And without realizing it, both of them were walking toward the place where their story had quietly begun. The path to the old field looked narrower than Daniel remembered. Grass had grown taller, and the fence along the road leaned slightly with age. But the oak tree was still there. It stood proudly in the middle of the field, its branches stretching wide against the darkening sky. Daniel and Lily walked toward it slowly. For a moment, neither of them spoke. When they reached the trunk, Lily brushed her fingers across the bark. "There it is," she said softly. The carving had faded with time, but it was still visible. D+L. Daniel let out a quiet laugh. "I can't believe it survived 20 years." Some things last longer than we expect, Lily replied. They sat down in the grass beneath the tree, just like they had when they were children. The sunset painted the sky with shades of orange and pink. For a while they simply watched the horizon. It's strange, Lily said eventually. I used to think about this place a lot after we moved away. Daniel turned toward her. You did? Yeah, whenever life felt confusing, I'd remember how simple everything felt here. Daniel nodded slowly. I used to think about you too. Lily smiled gently. Really? Sometimes I wondered what would have happened if you never left. The breeze rustled the leaves above them. Lily looked down at the coin still in her hand. You know, when I was a kid, I actually believed we'd see each other again someday. And Mary, Daniel teased. She laughed. Well, maybe not that part. Daniel leaned back on his hands. Funny thing is, every relationship I had, something always felt missing. Lily glanced at him. Maybe you were comparing everyone to a girl with messy hair who climbed trees. Maybe. They both laughed softly. Then Lily grew quiet. Life doesn't usually give people second chances like this, she said. Daniel studied her expression. What do you mean? I mean, two kids make a silly promise. 20 years later, they meet again under the same tree. She looked at him with a thoughtful smile. That's either a huge coincidence or fate. Daniel reached over and took the coin from her hand. He held it up so the fading sunlight reflected off its surface. When we made this promise, he said, I thought it meant we'd never be apart. He paused. But maybe it meant something else. Like what? Lily asked. Maybe it meant that no matter where life took us, we'd find our way back. Lily didn't respond right away. Instead, she looked up at the carving on the tree. Two simple initials scratched by two children who believed the world was small enough to hold their dreams. She smiled. You know what's funny? What? I'm not that fearless kid anymore. Daniel raised an eyebrow. Really? You moved across the country, built a career, and started your own art business. That's different, she said. Climbing trees was easier. Daniel stood up and offered her his hand. Well, maybe we can start with something simpler. Lily looked at his hand curiously. Like what? Dinner. She laughed. That's your big romantic move. Hey, I'm easing into it. She took his hand and stood. As they walked away from the tree, the sky slowly darkened above them. But neither of them felt like the moment was ending. It felt like something new was beginning. The promise they made as children had never really been about marriage. It had been about connection, about two hearts believing, even in their innocence, that some people are meant to cross paths again. And sometimes, if fate is kind, they meet again exactly where their story began.